Clerk will report.
27 members have voted aye. 11 members have voted no.
And pursuant to the resolution, Article 1, that resolution is adopted and will be reported to the House.
The clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 21 ayes and 16 noes.
And Article 1 is agreed to.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 17 noes.
The article is agreed to.
Scenes from 3 impeachments right there in the House and Judiciary Committee. We're going to talk about that now on our roundtable, joined by our regular contributor, Christie. Also, Patrick Gaspard, president of the Open Society Foundation, also served as political director, ambassador to South Africa under President Obama. Washington Post columnist Ruth Marcus, she's out with a new book, Supreme Ambition, Brett Kavanaugh and the Conservative Takeover. And Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review, his new book, The Case for Nationalism. Welcome to you all. And Patrick Gaspard, let me begin with you. We just saw the Judiciary Committee 3 times, going back to 1973. There's some consistency, some overlap in the impeachment articles of those 3 committees. Very inconsistent response. So we've seen each time the response progressively more partisan.
Yeah, and that's no surprise in the era that we're living in right now, particularly since we know that the conversation that's taking place in the halls of Congress is one that's being played for television and being played for November of next year. It has very, very little to do, regrettably, with the rule of law, irrespective of the abuse that our Foreign Service officers occurred from the State Department, from this White House, irrespective of the context of the relationship that the U.S. has with Ukraine at a time when its sovereignty was violated by Russia, and at a time when the President of the United States said to the President of the Ukraine, I need you to do us a favor, which was a political favor. That's not the conversation that's taking place.
Rich, you wrote this week that impeachment is becoming somewhat normalized.
Yeah, I just think we're all saying this is historic. The rhetoric around it's really hot, as we heard earlier on the program. But basically, this is now a pro forma exercise, in my view. The House Democrats want to get off their plate as soon as possible. It's not convulsing the nation. Even Democratic presidential candidates aren't talking about it very much on the campaign trail. So I tend to believe when he gets acquitted in the Senate, as he inevitably will, that this, like so many other things in the Trump era, 2 weeks later, it'll feel like it happened a decade ago and will have very little effect on the presidential politics going forward.
Ruth Marcus, the Democrats may not be talking about it as much. Actually, I'm not sure that's exactly true. But we know that President Trump is talking about a lot, tweeting about a lot, including something you should know something about. He said, after watching the disgraceful way that a wonderful man, Brett Kavanaugh, was treated by the Democrats, and now seeing firsthand how these same radical left do-nothing Dems are treating the whole impeachment hoax, I understand why so many Dems are voting Republican. You do see strong echoes between the Kavanaugh confirmation and impeachment going on right now.
Sure, and I think the biggest echo is this and it's something that you alluded to earlier, the increasing tribalism, the reflexive partisanship. I spent yesterday, which we saw in Kavanaugh, everybody goes to their sides. The facts are not necessarily what is determining their decision-making. It's the desired outcome. And the desire to find facts depends on which side you're on and what you want the outcome to be. I spent yesterday rereading what we lived through, which was the Clinton impeachment. And when you listen to the rhetoric there, some of it is very similar. There's Democrats talking about coups and Republicans talking about the rule of law. But there's also Democrats who are willing to be way more critical of their president, President Clinton, talking about his deplorable, unacceptable behavior than anything you see from Republicans now.
And one huge difference, if you go back to the Clinton, impeachment, the day he was impeached in the House, you had a pretty fulsome apology from President Clinton back in 1998. As you've talked about before, Christie, there's no way we're going to see that from President Trump. And it does appear that, at least in the small p political way, that strategy is working for him.
Well, it's not even a strategy, George. It's who he is. I mean, I heard someone this week ask me about whether his tactics are working. I'm like, he doesn't have tactics. This is him. And so whether you saw him at the rally in Hershey, Pennsylvania, or you see him in any of the tweets that he's sending, this is who he is. It's how he's always conducted himself, whether it's been in his political life or in his business life. When someone attacks him, he attacks back twice as hard. He doesn't apologize for things almost ever. A couple of times in the 2016 campaign, but that was really an exception. So, you know, what we're seeing, though, is, and I would disagree a little bit on the Clinton side. Absolutely, the President Clinton at the time apologized, but the tribalism was still the same. Because in the end, you can say whatever you want to say, but how you vote is what you do. And no. Listen, Democrats, there were
something
no.
more important
Wait a
than
second,
that.
though, Patrick. There's no Democrats who voted for impeachment of Bill Clinton, is there?
There were five Democrats in the House who voted for impeachment of Bill Clinton.
Yeah, there were, and I think that I actually want to quote Rich. Rich made a terribly important.
Now you're in trouble.
Earlier this week, Rich wrote a column for.
I need to sit back.
A column for Politico where he disagreed that these offenses were impeachable, but he said very clearly that there was something irresponsible about the way the president conducted himself. That really matters. When Democrats said back in 1998 that President Clinton's behavior was just grotesque, that matters when you're setting standards for the highest office in the world. So I would respect Ted Cruz and other Republicans, Jordan, Gohmert, the whole class, if they said, we don't believe that this rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors from impeachment, but there is something untoward about using presidential authority in this way with an ally to subvert our national interests. That's not what they're saying.
And Ruth,
so the standard's distorted.
We have seen a pretty big shift. I mean, we saw what Senator Cruz said back in September. Lindsey Graham back in September was saying, if you show me anything besides the phone call indicating any kind of pressure campaign, any kind of quid pro quo, I might change my mind. But we did see in the House, at least in the Judiciary Committee, something much more of just what the president did was right.
Yes, and Lindsey Graham a few months ago opened to that. Facts developed that made it harder for him to continue that line. One of the things that's striking, though, is Lindsey Graham back in the day when he was an impeachment manager, which is to say a prosecutor in the case against President Clinton, where he talked about really begged the Senate to keep an open mind, said if you make up your mind in advance, then we're not doing our jobs, we're really losing something as a country. Boy, now it's a crock. I've made up my mind. Certainly, the oath for impartial justice doesn't mean that you're a regular juror and you have to come to this completely tabula rasa. That's ridiculous. Certainly, Democratic senators have expressed, and Democratic presidential candidates have expressed their point of view. Nonetheless, this absolute unwillingness to try to get to the bottom of what happened here and to consider whether it really is problematic is appalling from my point of view.
I think almost all Senate Republicans think what Trump did was wrong here, whether they'll say it or not.
Whether they say it or not is
I think they should, but also almost all of them sincerely believe that this does not justify impeachment and removal. And if you look at the other side of this ledger, if Democrats just had held hearings to get the bottom of this, expose it, extract damaging revelations, it'd be a home run for them. It's just trying to make the case that this episode in particular justifies removing a president for the first time in our history. That's where they're falling down. And at the end of the day, nothing happened. Ukraine got the money, didn't even announce it.
Nothing happened because the president knew that he was exposed, right?
No,
the president
because he was getting political pressure, and even his own aides
released the aid after he was aware of the whistleblower.
15 Republicans in the Senate who voted to either impeach or convict President Clinton. Only one of them, 15 Republicans who were there, only one of them, Susan Collins, voted against convicting him. Why is what President Clinton did impeachable and removable, and what President Trump did doesn't rise to that level? That's the one I have a really hard time with.
I think this is the strongest case Democrats can make. Republicans impeach Clinton with no hope of convicting him in the Senate, and we're going to do the same thing. But that is not the standard that Nancy Pelosi or any of them set out at the beginning of this process. They said they'd only do it if it was going to be bipartisan, and it's going to be bipartisan the other way. You're going to have House Democrats voting against this. You could have some Democrats in the Senate voting against removal.
But that doesn't really answer the question. The question is, why should President Clinton have been removed from office and President Trump not?
I think Republicans should have ended up censuring him instead, and Democrats would have been wiser to do this.
That's not what we're seeing. I did want to ask you about Jeff Van Drew, Congressman from New Jersey, now apparently going to be a Republican Congressman from New Jersey. Of course, you were New Jersey governor. How much of Chairman Nadler's analysis is right there, that he's switching parties, well, he was going to lose a Democratic primary?
He was a Democratic state senator for all 8 years that I was governor in an incredibly Republican district, and found his way to win over a number of years. Every time we thought we might be able to get him, we never did. So I don't think I think there's always political considerations in these things, George, but I also think that Congressman Van Drew has become increasingly uncomfortable with the leftward shift of the Democratic caucus. He is a moderate Democrat, and I don't think he feels like, from what I can tell, that there's a place for him
Because
in
there's
the House
moderation-
caucus.
Because there's moderation in the Republican Party.
No,
apparently.
but you know, listen, he may be uncomfortable for other reasons if he moves to the Republican caucus. But right now, he's in a situation where he's going to have to vote. If he wants to be in the mainstream of the Democratic caucus, he has to vote for impeachment, which, by the way, his district was a double-digit Trump district in 2016.
Well, but double-digit Trump districts have been swinging to Democrats in the specials and all the recent elections.
I think they did in 18.
When you say that there's always political consideration in these things, I think I would change the word always to only. There are only political considerations in these matters, and your party never rewards you for going against the majority interest in your...
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.